right, good morning, everyone. It looks like we are recording and we are live streaming to the public. This is Chair French. I will be presiding over this hearing this morning, and I am now calling it to order. Um, I am joined by my fellow commissioners Dwight Keene and Annie Keither. This is docket number 24 CONS 3009 CUIC, and it's captioned in the matter of the application of ZNL Oil LLC for a permit to authorize the injection of salt water into its Pfrem 3A well located in the northwest quarter of Section 18, Township 31 South, Range 10 East, Elk County, Kansas. We will begin this morning with our entries of appearance. And we're just going to go through each of the parties and have you introduce yourself. So first for operator.
Operator appears by its attorney, Keith Brock of Ottawa.
Okay. Now our protester. Oh, Mr. Wilson, you are on mute.
I'm sorry. I'm Frank Wilson, representing myself.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning.
And for commission staff.
Good morning, Chair French. Kelsey Marsh on behalf of commission staff and the public generally.
Good morning, Mr. Marsh. All right, we now will turn to notice of this morning's hearing. Does staff have a recommendation regarding notice of the hearing?
Yes. Notice of this hearing was contained in the presiding officer's January 8th order setting an evidentiary hearing in this docket for Friday, February 16th, 2024, beginning at 9:00 a.m. via the Zoom video conferencing platform. The presiding officer's order was properly served on the parties. Additionally, the applicant published notice of the evidentiary hearing in the Wichita Eagle on January 17th, 2024, and the Prairie Star on January 18th, 2024, in compliance with KAR 82-3-135. I would also note that the applicant and its counsel, as well as the protester, are in attendance today. Therefore, staff recommends that notice is proper and that the commission has the jurisdiction to hear this matter at this time and place.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. Are there any objections to a finding that this hearing this morning is properly noticed? Hearing none, and based on staff's recommendation, I will find that notice is proper and the commission has jurisdiction over the proceeding at this time and place. Let's now move to preliminary matters. Just a few things, a few housekeeping things. Most of you have heard these a few times, but want to discuss how we're going to handle things since we're doing this over Zoom. We know things can go wrong. If party encounters a technical issue, please just ask to go off the record. We can take a brief recess, resolve that issue, and then go back on the record. Second, we would ask everybody to keep your microphones off or muted when you're not scheduled to talk. And if you would please mute your cell phones in your offices, other electronic devices, that would be appreciated. Third, so the parties are aware, if the commission needs to consult among ourselves for something like an evidentiary ruling, we'll go off the record. We'll enter what's called a Zoom breakout room to discuss that, and then we'll go back on the record and return. Fourth, since we're doing this by Zoom, please be very careful to identify exactly what you're referring to when you're discussing pre-filed testimony, exhibits, or other paper documents. We do have copies of all that on hand, so we should be able to follow along if you identify it. Before I turn to the parties to see if you all have any other preliminary matters, I understand Commissioner Keene has one preliminary matter to address before we begin. Commissioner Keene, would you like to go off mute?
Yes, thank you, Chair French. Good morning, everyone. At the outset this morning, I wanted to directly address with the parties to this proceeding the issue of whether or not I have a conflict and whether or not I should recuse from this docket. Night before last, I was reading through the pre-filed testimony in preparation for this hearing. In doing so, the next to last document from that packet that I reviewed was Mr. Milligan's pre-filed direct testimony. As I was reading through Mr. Milligan's background information, I noted that among several oilfield activities, he performed pipe testing services. It was then that I realized that I knew Mr. Milligan. In essence, my past contact with Mr. Milligan was from the occasional utilization of his pipe and tubing testing services in my prior private sector occupation. And in this respect, all direct contacts predate April of 2018, when I first became a member of this commission. Prior to this docket, I was not familiar with the name or entity Z&L Oil LLC, or its ownership or its operations. Frankly, I had not remembered that Milligan was Zach's last name. Not until reading the direct pre-filed testimony did I know that he was engaged in a wide variety of oil field activities beyond pipe testing. When I came onto the commission in 2018, my interest in a family oil production business was placed into a blind trust, and I was formally separated from management and control of the enterprise. Accordingly, since joining the commission, I have been removed from the day-to-day operational activities, including the selection and utilization of any well servicing and pipe testing contractors. With this backdrop in mind, I'll state my position rather succinctly and directly. If any parties to this docket have any concerns about my ability to fairly and impartially participate in this hearing specifically, or in this docket generally, I am most willing to resolve all of these concerns and any doubt by recusing myself from further participation in this docket. If there are no such concerns or objections, I will participate in this docket. Thank you, Commissioner French.
All right, would any of the parties like to respond?
I don't think anything that was said would require recusal from the operator's perspective. It's such a long time ago and such a minimal amount of contact that it's our position that Commissioner Keene would be should participate in this docket.
Thank you, Mr. Brock.
I too have no objection. I no request for him to recuse.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
And staff doesn't have any issues.
Okay, all right. Well, we will proceed then. Thank you, Commissioner Keene. Well, with that out of the way, are there any other preliminary matters that the parties wish to raise before we move into hearing from the witnesses? Or before we move to opening statements, my apology. All right, hearing none. We'll talk a little bit about the procedure for the hearing. So the parties are going to make opening statements, then we will have examination of the witnesses. After examination of the witnesses, we will allow for cross-examination, commission questions, and redirect any further examination, recross, redirect. That would be at the discretion of the commission. Following witness examination, we'll allow closing statements and arrange for filing of post-hearing briefs if we find that necessary. Then we'll conclude the hearing. Let's move first to opening statements then, and we will start with Mr. Brock first.
I don't have much of an opening statement. I would just, from operator's perspective, this is an ordinary and routine application for an injection permit. The staff, professional geologist, has reviewed all evidence, reviewed the commission's regulations and the application, and is recommending approval of the application. The applicant will testify about his many years of experience. We'll seek to get him qualified as an expert witness. He'll testify that this well meets all commission rules and regulations and should be granted. And then we have an independent expert geologist who will seek to qualify as an expert, and he will also testify that this well meets all rules and regulations and the application should be granted. So from our perspective, this is there's nothing unique or out of the ordinary on this application at all.
Thank you, Mr. Brock. Mr. Wilson, do you have an opening statement? or would you like to make an opening statement?
Yes. My farm is very important to me. It's a small farm, and most of it has been in the family for almost 150 years. My great-grandfather, Charles Franklin Wilson, purchased the main part of it in 1878. I grew up there. I want to protect the environment there. My wife and I intend to pass it on to our two daughters someday. I will refer you to my notice of protest and request for a hearing and my pre-filed direct testimony for the reasons I have protested the subject application. With respect to this matter, I'm outraged with how it has proceeded. I have serious concerns with the subject application itself and I believe certain pre-filed testimony has not been truthful. I also have concerns with this evidentiary hearing. It's not going to be fair and honest. Accordingly, I request that this hearing be suspended or canceled and that an investigation be commenced into all activities and operations of Z&L Oil LLC, Edward AAA, and C&E Oil LLC on the following oil and gas leases. The Pfhrem lease, which covers the west half of the northwest quarter of Section 18, 3110, Elk County, Kansas. The Moline-Wilson lease, which covers the southwest quarter of the northeast quarter and the northeast quarter and the northeast quarter of said Section 18. And the C.L. Wilson lease, which covers the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter and the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter of said Section 18, including all wells of any type, producing, non-producing, temporarily abandoned, junked and abandoned, plugged and abandoned, saltwater injection and or disposal wells, plugged and unplugged, located on said leases, including the proposed Pfhrem number 3A well, which is the subject to this docket number. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Marsh, do you have an opening statement?
Yes, thank you, Chair French. May it please the commission. ZNL has filed an application requesting to inject into the Mississippi Formation at its Pfhrem 3A well at a maximum rate of 1,000 barrels per day and a maximum pressure of 700 PSI. Staff has attempted to address the concerns and issues that have been raised in opposition to the application. As stated in staff's testimony, the application submitted by ZNL Oil for the Pfhrem number 3A well meets all of the permitting factors outlined under the Commission's rules and regulations. Additionally, any concerns regarding the application appear to have been addressed by ZNL Oil. Commission staff recommends that the Commission grant approval of ZNL Oil's injection application. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Marsh. We will now move to examination of the witnesses, and we will begin first with Mr. Brock, you may call your first witness.
We would call Brian Fisher.
Hello, can you hear me
Hello.
okay?
Yes, we do hear you, Mr. Fisher. Thank you. And we do not have a court reporter with us this morning. We are recording this, but because we don't have a court reporter, I will be swearing you in. So if you would please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do so, sir.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Brock, back to you.
Can you please state your name and business address for the record?
My name is Brian G. Fisher, Fisher Consulting. I office out of my home, 5762 North Charles Street, Wichita, Kansas. I do have an office also at my former employer, Falcon Exploration, on North Market Street. I'm sorry, I don't remember the address. But I office and have geological data at both places.
And are you the same Brian Fisher that caused to be pre-filed testimony on October the 13th, 2023, consisting of 9 pages and no exhibits?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your testimony?
Yes, I do. Page 5, line 11, the word mid-states, excuse me, should say Z and L's. Also on page 8, line 21, mid states should also say Z&Ls. Sorry about that.
Mr. Fisher, if I asked you the same questions contained in your pre-filed testimony today, now that you're under oath, would your answers be the same?
Yes, it would.
Can you please summarize your educational background, experience, and expertise in the area of well construction, or well completions, petroleum geology, and groundwater protection?
Yes, I have a long resume, and if I'm too long, please cut me off.
Just the high points will probably be sufficient.
Okay. I have my BS in geology, Fredonia State University of Western New York. I have graduate hours from Wichita State University towards my master's, also Akron University in Ohio, Oklahoma State University, groundwater contamination, and I'm also a graduate of the Kansas Public Health Leadership Institute, the 2004-2005 cycle. My first job was at resource exploration out of Shreveport, Louisiana, and later in Canton, Ohio. From January 1975 to May 1978, my first employment was a wellsite geologist. And later I acted as a field engineer. I picked the casing point for surface casing because we wanted to be in the bedrock. And then I helped run the 8 5/8, no, excuse me, the 2 7/8 casing for completion in the Clinton sandstone. And then later, I moved to Shreveport, Louisiana, worked underneath another geologist, or 2 other geologists, and then transferred back to the headquarters and moved to Canton, Ohio. And I worked in Ohio in that office there. And there I did.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Fisher. If I could just ask Mr. Brock where this is going. I believe Mr. Fisher's professional background is in his pre-filed testimony, and it's not our intent to take additional direct testimony this morning.
And that may be my, in the past, the commission has asked us to lay the foundation for the witness to be qualified as an expert through these questions. So that's all. I don't want to introduce anything beyond what's in the pre-filed testimony. I'm only wanting to get him recognized as an expert. So I'm willing.
Yeah, to the extent it's already covered, and I believe it's covered pretty extensively in the written testimony. No need to ask it orally.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I don't know whether this question was asked in the pre-filed testimony. Have you testified before the commission previously as an expert witness?
Yes, I have, sir.
Okay. And were your qualifications as an expert accepted by the KCC in that instance?
I believe they were. I didn't hear any objections to me, to my testimony.
Does the commission require anything further in order to qualify Mr. Fisher as an expert on the basis of his education, licensure, work history, and experience in the field of well completions, petroleum geology, and groundwater protection? Okay, we'd move for the admission of the pre-filed testimony of Brian Fisher filed on October 13th, 2023, consisting of 9 pages and no exhibits.
Is there any objection?
No objections.
Without objection, it will be admitted.
Thank you. We tender the witness for cross-examination.
All right, thank you. We will now move to cross-examination of Mr. Fisher, and we will begin with Mr. Wilson, to the extent you have any cross for Mr. Fisher.
Yes, I do, Chair Prince. Thank you very much. You stated in your pre-filed testimony that you have reviewed the application and feel that the granting of the application will prevent waste without posing any real risk to fresh and usable water. Have you reviewed the application on all exhibits?
Well, I have the application in front of me, and within the application are exhibits. I mean, there's a plat map showing the locations of the wells.
Okay, and
Also the construction diagram. I'm sorry, I meant to add that.
okay, thank you. Are you satisfied that all wells of any type have been identified on the application's plat on page 4? They have the application and they have the instructions on what the Kansas Corporation Commission requires there, the names of wells, etc.
Well, they were hard to read, but I went through the what I call scout tickets, which I have in my office, my own set. And then I went online with the Kansas Geological Society and
Now,
reviewed.
excuse me, Mr. Fisher, I'm just asking you with respect to the application.
Okay, well, I consulted out other references outside of the document to confirm their location. And then I went ahead and went to the Corporation Commission and requested copies of plugging reports. And then I went online with the Kansas Geological Survey and looked at their records. And I have my own records. And then I went to the Kansas Geological Society and I looked at their records. Did I answer your question, sir?
Well, with all due respect, no, you didn't. I asked you with respect to the plat on page 4 of the application. It says on there that it's just, I mean, please read it. You got it in front of you.
Yes.
Show the following information. Injection well, all producing wells, inactive wells, plugged wells, and other wells within a half-mile radius. All lease boundaries, lease operators, unleased mineral rights owners, well numbers, and producing wells, producing formation tops.
I don't see any producing formation tops. I do see well names. I see well locations. I see symbols indicating plugged wells, plug producers, dry holes, and previous injection by the symbols, which I recognize. Did I answer your question, sir?
No, sir. Okay, let me try another approach here. Take a look at your plat and look in the southeast quarter of section 12 of 31-9. What is the name of that well, please?
It's not listed on there. So southeast quarter of section 12,
Yes.
it is not listed.
Okay, let me help you out. Go to, can you see where the proposed injection well is?
Yes.
Okay, go north up and to
Yes.
the west, to your left, and you'll see an indication of a producing well.
That's correct.
Okay, what is the name of that producing well?
I believe it's a Walker number 4. That's what's listed when you click on it with the database, but it's not on the map. I was referring to the state survey when I click
Okay,
on it.
well, Mr. Fisher, I'm very familiar with that piece of land there. I'm very familiar with all of this land here.
Yes.
I think that where that location is actually an old hay field that I used to haul hay in many years ago, and I'm still familiar with it.
Okay.
There's no well there. There's no oil well there. Okay.
That's correct.
There is no oil well there, but you just said that the Walker well is located there.
Okay. May I explain my response?
Please.
Okay. Well, it looks like this map was created from a database in the Kansas Geological Survey. And to save time for my client, I did the same thing. And I noted that when I looked at that well, I could not find anything about that producing oil well. But later, when when the survey allows you to click on that well location, it tells you what it is. And I had a conversation with Zach about that, and I think it's located wrong. I think it's in section 34 down the south, but
Well, excuse me.
it is properly plugged wherever it is.
Well, I know where the well is. The Walker well, I know the Walker family. They're south of Moline. Okay, that well, there's no well there. And this is not I don't care what database is used, really. This is the applicant's application for an injection well. And I'm concerned with the truth here. I want to know what's going on here, or what the applicant thinks is going on. And I don't think it's an unreasonable question to ask you what the name of that well is and why it's showing up as a producing well. It clearly shows up as a producing well, does it not?
Chairman,
No,
I'm
it
gonna,
actually has been plugged.
Chairman, I object to the line of questioning. It's outside the scope of his direct. The questions are more testimony than they are questions. I think the questions should be limited to what Mr. Fisher has testified to in his direct testimony.
So I will sustain the objection. I think Mr. Fisher has agreed with you to a good extent, and he's explained why he believes it's shown as a producing well, and it's because I think he said that's where it shows as what it shows in the KGS record. So I would say just keep moving along, but I think that line of questioning, you'll have an opportunity to testify on that yourself here in a few minutes, Mr. Wilson. So you can continue, but we need to move on from the questioning of what that well is and why it's shown to be producing well.
If you actually look at the well, it's shown as a producing well, but when you investigate it further, it's actually been plugged. And in recent times, there's a record of it being plugged. So even though it's shown on the map in that location, where it really belongs, it's been properly plugged. So the well symbol's wrong. It's not producing anymore. It's been plugged.
So Mr. Wilson and Mr. Fisher, just for clarity of the record, the well is not where it's indicated in the wrong spot. There is no well there. And it's somewhere outside this area of review, but it is plugged. And we're in agreement on that?
Well, I am, because I researched it personally, I am, sir.
Well, I mean, you testified that you reviewed the application and you were good with everything. And then I'm trying to determine, what the applicant's up to here. And then when I hear testimony that, well, that well's been plugged or whatever, I mean, it shows up here as a producing well. And we're talking about the environment. We're talking about quality of rights in this matter. And I just don't understand why this isn't correct. But let's move on. Chair Prince wants us to move on, so let's move on.
Okay.
In the west half of the northeast quarter of said section 18, that's over on my farm, there shows some producing wells there. Well, there's some producing wells. There's all sorts of stuff kind of there. There's some plug producers and stuff like that. What is the name of those wells? The wells are, it's supposed to, the instructions clearly say that they want the well numbers and the formation tops and everything. And I don't see it on my copy. Is it on your copy?
No, it's not. I have what was filed with the Kansas Corporation Commission, and there's no well numbers. It does say Wilson. It's kind of dark. That's why I went and did my own research, because I was having trouble reading this. I was a little dark, and then I want to, because this is a copy of original. No, you're right, sir. It doesn't have any well numbers.
But you've seen the, can you send me that? I mean, I'm trying to take this application and this hearing seriously, but I'm looking at the application and it's very puzzling. It's very frightening that someone, an important matter like this, that we can just ignore the written instructions on the application.
Um,
Let me ask you this,
Sure.
there's, excuse me, go ahead, Mr. Fisher.
Well, I didn't, I was asked to review this application and to check the wells as best of my ability to make sure they've been plugged. And I did that. In fact, of course, I noticed that well in the southeast. Also, I found another well, the Pfhrem, and I made the operator aware of that. And
I'm sorry, the number 5 frame?
yes, I believe it's the Pfhrem, and it's been properly plugged.
Okay.
I felt I reviewed all the wells the best of my ability within the radius, half-mile radius of the proposed location.
I don't see the number 5 frame on my map. Can you point to where it is? And I got to tell you, the number 5 frame was drilled in 1965. I was 13 years old, and I was there at the rig when it was drilled, so I know where it is, but it's not on this map. I'll tell you.
Okay. Well, I found it, and I made the operator aware of it, and it is properly plugged.
Okay. And it was the number 5 frame.
Yes.
Now it's did they file a plugging report with the Corporation Commission or a request to plug it?
Yes, they did.
Was there a transfer of operatorship of that well, the number 5 frame, from Ed AAA to ZNL Oil when ZNL purchased it in 2018?
I don't know the answer to that question. That would be a legal opinion, wouldn't it? Transfer of ownership, that would have to be done by an attorney or with the.
Well, I'm talking about is it the T1? I can't remember what it is. It's a Corporation Commission form that requires the operator to transfer operatorship of a well. What was the status of that well, the number 5?
All I can do is answer that it was discovered and plugged, and it was very recent.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Recently, meaning
A couple of months. Let's see. It was after the application and before this hearing.
What about the number 4 frame? Do you know where it is?
Yes, I do. I don't memorize these, but I have scout tickets. I could tell you the location. As a geologist, you have access to scout tickets, also the records of the state survey, which is public, and then a private library of the Kansas Geological Society, which I'm a member. I'm searching around in my papers here, and I was looking for a map where I labeled them. You still want me to answer that question? Where is it located?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And some details about it. When was it drilled and when was it plugged and was it plugged?
Bear with me. I'm looking through some scout tickets, okay?
I'm happy to. Thank you.
Okay. Excuse the delay, everyone. I'm not able to put my hands on the record. I've got let's see. I've got the Pfhrem 2, 3, 1, 5, 2 again. And I'm not able to find in my notes about the 5.
The 4, you mean?
Say that again.
You mean the 4, don't you?
I have hearing aids.
The question was with respect to the number 4 well. That's what you can't find, right? You know about the number 5 well, right?
Yes.
Let's make it easy. Mr. Fisher, why don't you just start with the number 1 well and just go through them and just tell me when they were drilled and if they've been plugged and when. I don't want to make this difficult.
Sure.
This information should have been on the application. And it's not fair for you to have to try to dig it up. But
Okay, start with a Pfhrem well. Number 1. I made my own scout ticket. I didn't write down the date, but it was J.R. Fester, northwest, southeast, northwest, northwest, section 18, 3110. The elevation was 1189. Top of the Mississippian was 2,210 feet, a minus 1020. Now that would be the number 1. Now go to the number 3.
yeah,
Are you
just
still-
very briefly, I don't want to take up everybody's time, but
I hit a key. I'm on my daughter's computer, so can you still hear me?
yes, I can.
Okay, and I apologize for those sounds. Okay, that was a 1. And then with an area investigation, I went to the number 3, northwest, 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 section 18, 31 south, 10 west. And I have written down not oil, API number 15-049-19253. They said 4.5 at 2200, and it was P&A 46 at 2010. Okay, then I
I'm sorry, was it plugged in 2010?
2000. I'm sorry, 2200, the TD.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, that was a 1 and 3. I have in front of me the number 2, northwest, southeast, northwest, northwest, section 18, 3110, API number 15-049-19307, saltwater disposal well, TD 2262. This P&A 4/6/2010.
Is there anything on there about that well failing a mechanical integrity test?
Say that again, sir.
Is there anything on what you're looking at that indicates that that particular well failed the mechanical integrity test? That it was a saltwater disposal well.
I would say I didn't find anything on that question, sir. So no, there's no information, but it's plugged.
Well, what you're looking at indicate that it's plugged, right?
Yes,
Okay.
it's plugged 4/6/2010.
Okay.
That's what I've written down in my notes.
Okay. Can you tell, is that the day that AAA started transporting water over to the Wilson lease and putting it in the well on me?
I don't have that information.
Okay. Okay. Okay, continue.
Got my cards out, information out of order. Let's see here. Okay, then I have the Pfhrem 3A drilled originally by C&E Oil, and that is the basis of the application for Z&L oil to make into a injection well. Let's see, you were asking me, it was spudded 9/6/2014. And it is with 3 other wells. So there's a common tank variety are all reported together. It cumed the records show it's cumed 60,948 barrels of oil. It came on. There was a jump in production. If you examine the decline curve, I estimate it bumped up the lease briefly to 200 barrels of oil a day. More. Top of the Mississippian is 2252.
I didn't ask you those questions. I'm sorry, Mr. Fish. I don't need to know. Would you look at that well on the map, on the plat on page 4? It's the applicant well, and it's supposed to show a little circle with a triangle around it. And I don't see that. Maybe you have a different plat than I do.
May I? The triangle is off to the side. And it is in the center of the drawn circle because I got a protractor out. The person who did the application for the Z&L,
Mr. Millian?
yeah, they drew a circle around that well. and they do have 3A labeled on it.
Okay, and is that the Wolf 3A? It says Wolf there.
I see that.
I'm trying to understand the map, and if you don't understand it, that's fine. Just tell me so. But is that, I see the name Wolf on there. See, I look at these, you know, I was a petroleum landman for 40 years, and I worked for companies where you had to follow the instructions. And if you didn't follow the instructions, you were out the door. And I'm trying to understand this map.
Commissioner, I don't want to be annoying, but I'm going to object again. I feel like the protestant is just testifying. It. He should just do that during his direct testimony portion of the hearing.
Well, with all due
Any
respect,
response, Mr. Wilson? Go ahead, respond.
well, with all due respect, this plat's a pretty important part of this application, and the witness has testified that he's read. I mean, there's an important part of what's going on out here is to understand the wells and what is the status of these wells and what's going on. And I guess I don't understand why the instructions weren't followed. And is it that hard to put the well numbers on there? Is it that hard to put the lease stuff on there? I mean, you know, I got to tell you, when I filed my protest, and stop me if you need to, when I filed my protest, I don't do this kind of work. And I submitted it electronically, and stupid me, I single spaced it. And the commission rejected it. And then I had to redo it. And I had a heck of a time because I couldn't figure out how to cut and paste it because it was configured differently. They rejected it. Not a word was wrong, I don't think, but they rejected it because it was single spaced and not double spaced. Okay. I don't want to waste everybody's time, and I don't want to beat a dead horse to death, but why don't we stop this nonsense and refile this application and do it right? I have to understand this. My wife has to understand it. My kids might have to understand it someday. Is there any standards? Is there any consequences for this nonsense? Because this is nonsense, Chair Friends.
No, I think we all see your point. I am going to sustain the objection to the extent, I mean, you'd clearly like to make some points here. I think if you can cut to the chase with some questions of Mr. Fisher that are more pointed and get us somewhere other than just asking him to describe all the wells in the application. What your point is taken on that piece. You did have the opportunity to pre-file testimony to present your position, and you will be up for examination today. So additional testimony you need to give may be taken at that time. But I would ask you just to cut to the chase on any questions with Mr. Fisher. But we certainly understand the point you've made about the deficiencies you believe exist in the application. So I'm gonna sustain the objection to the extent it goes to just further questioning about what is in the application.
Okay, well, I guess I don't understand the objection or why it was sustained, but I will move on. And I certainly disagree, but we got to move on. Let's. Okay, so producing formation tops, they're not on there, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and unleased
I'm
mineral
looking.
right.
Okay, go ahead.
Is there any information about unleased mineral rights owners on your copy?
Well, I wasn't looking for unleased minerals, but I was just checking to make sure all of.
Well, I understand. I'm just the simple question.
Okay.
Does your copy show unleased mineral rights owners?
I can't answer that question. I'm a geologist, sir, and just looking at, since you asked me the question, I don't see that kind of information on this map. And I'm only looking at the, what is it, page 4? But, you know, on page 3, there is a description of leasehold and mineral owners. So if I go to page 3, I mean, there's information listed there.
Yeah, I'm not talking about page 3. I've seen page 3. I'm talking about page 4 and what was required. But I think Chair French wants us to move on, so let's do. And then let's see, lease information. How many acres was in the Pfhrem lease?
I don't
Let
know.
me ask you this. I've been to the courthouse. I've seen the lease, and it's dated. Oh, I think it's in my testimony. It's dated back in 1960 from the Pfhrem Bill Pfhrem to J.R. Fester, and it covers clearly the west half of the northwest quarter of said section 18. And does your map indicate that that's where the Pfhrem lease is on page 4 on that plat?
I'm not sure. It has the northwest of section 18, but there's with a few names and well spots. I don't know. I don't think that information is on the map. It does say Pfhrem lease, excuse me, and the word wolf.
Yeah, Pfhrem lease. And that's over on the east half of the northwest quarter. Is that not correct on your map?
Yes, I would agree with you, sir.
Okay. Look, can you just tell me the name of the I'm familiar with that tract of land. And that is not the Pfhrem lease. It's the Elizabeth Wilson lease years ago, and there were 4 wells drilled on it, and I'm familiar with all 4 wells, and none of them are named Pfhrem. They're all, they were the Elizabeth Wilson 1, 2, 3, and 4. Do you see any indication? I mean, do you see any indication that there are any Pfhrem wells drilled in the east half of the northwest quarter?
No, other than what was written on it called Pfhrem lease. But you're correct that I did look at those wells, and they are like the well in the northeast of the northwest was drilled by Leighton Oil Company. The number 4, Elizabeth Wilson. Okay. Drilled
Yes,
in.
that was drilled in the 1980s. Yes.
Yes, September 1986.
Yeah. When was the first well drilled on the Elizabeth Wilson?
When was the first? Well, well, there is a number 1 Wilson, but it's drilled in the northeast.
Yeah, we're talking about the east half of the northwest.
Let's see. There's Elizabeth Wilson, number 2, drilled in the northeast, southeast, northwest. I didn't write down the date. And I had to make my own scout ticket.
Did you review any files that were owned by Z&L Oil when you were preparing your testimony or doing your work? Did he turn over any files to you, access to them?
No. I reviewed library and state files and my own information. Scout ticket set. I'll be more specific. I have a partial Eastern Kansas Scout ticket set.
Well, I'm kind of stupefied by this page 4 plat, that when the commission asks for information and it's not put on there, I guess I want to know what they're hiding, if anything. And I feel like they're hiding something here. I think full disclosure, we're talking about the environment here. We're talking about, disposal of 1,000 barrels of salt water a day maximum. Over 3 years, that's over 1 million barrels of salt water. And I own land out here, and I want to be assured that what's going on here, and have the wells been plugged, and if there are problems, who's going to take care of these problems and stuff. And when we get an application like this that is not being truthful, is not following the instructions, I think it ought to be rejected and start over.
So we understand that position, Mr. Wilson.
Well,
you'll have the opportunity to testify, and you have had the opportunity to testify, but I will ask if you have any additional questions for Mr. Fisher.
Okay, I'll wrap up. Thank you, Chair.
And I'm particularly interested in, if they can be directed at sort of the relevance, get to the relevance of, why the question helps us decide the factors that would go into approval or rejection of the of the application. And we do understand the position that that you believe there are deficiencies in the application. But if you can help us laser in a little more on the relevance of the question to connecting the dots to the standards we would use to approve or reject the application, I think that would be helpful as well.
Oh, well, thank you, Chair French, and I'm happy to. I think that of any place in southeast Kansas that put an injection well of a maximum of 700 PSIG and 1,000 barrels a day, this quarter section, this 80 acres is not the place. And I certainly want to know, and I think the Kansas Corporation Commission ought to know, what are the wells out here, and have they been plugged and abandoned? And I don't think from Mr. Fisher's testimony that we can be assured that they're accounted for. And I think the answers can be found. I think they're in some well files, either with the Kansas Geological Survey or the Society, or maybe in the operators' files. But I just think this is unacceptable to file an application like this that doesn't follow the instructions. This is not insignificant.
Sure. As I said, we understand that position. I'd just ask you to continue with any direct questions for Mr. Fisher. You'll also have the opportunity to ask questions of our staff, which I think may have some answers to some of your questions on the well plugging files, at least. So if you would just continue with questions, that would be good. We totally understand. I think at this point, the position on the application.
Well, with all due respect, Chair France, I don't think you understand, but I appreciate your comments, and I will move on. Mr. Fisher, on the questions were asked about mid-states in your pre-filed testimony. You tried to correct the questions, but is it really your place to correct the questions? Isn't it more appropriate that you would correct the answers? I mean, the questions were asked in 2 places about mid-states. And are you satisfied that Mid-States is not in any way a party to this action, to this application?
I really don't know the answer to that question, sir. I was just reviewing, making sure all the wells were properly plugged and researching all possible records, well locations, and making sure those are correct. And I informed the operator of my findings, and I reviewed all possible plugging reports.
Okay, you didn't answer my question. On page 5,
Okay.
lines 10 and 11, the question was asked, please describe the Pfhrem 3A well and its intended purpose if the Mid-States application is granted. Okay, and then you gave an answer.
Mr. Wilson, I believe he corrected that testimony to strike out Mid-States and to insert Z and L. So
Well,
you're
I don't-
asking about testimony that does not exist.
No, I'm sorry. I'm asking about he tried to correct the testimony. I'm asking about the question. I mean, how did Mid-States pop up here? And
Okay. I obtained a framework. Well, first thing, I wanted to do a good job for my client. So I obtained a document, and then I put in appropriate testimony, written testimony regarding the application. And that was a typo error or my oversight. I was just trying to make it true to form so it's consistent with the submittals to the Kansas Corporation Commission. I was trying to do a good job, but I missed a couple errors and I corrected them. So I hope I've answered your question.
okay, I didn't realize you had actually written the questions then. So thank you for your comments there. I too have made every mistake possible. So thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
I have no further questions.
All right. Does staff have any examination of this witness?
Staff does not, Chair French.
Okay. And commissioner questions. Commissioner Keither, do you have any questions for this witness?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
And Commissioner Keen, do you have any questions of this witness?
Very few, and I'll be brief. Good morning, Mr. Fisher.
Good morning, sir.
If I try to look at the issues presented by this matter holistically, and I step back metaphorically 30,000 feet, I find there's about 9 of them here, some of which I don't think deserve the weighting that others do. I think some have heavier weighting than others. And so what I want to do is just very quickly, and I'm not asking you to really repeat your testimony. I've read all of your pre-filed testimony. In performing your services for Z&L in this particular instance, I take it that notwithstanding what the map that was within the application contains, did you prepare your own map?
Yes, I did. Well, I started out with taking a shortcut. I went to the Kansas Geological Survey and downloaded their plat. And then based upon that plat, I started the process of identifying the wells. And to be honest, the well pointed out previously in the southeast of section 12. I didn't address that because it was a producing well. I mean, that's how it was listed with the survey. And I've never seen a well mislocated by the survey. You know, I'm calling it mislocated. And but I went to the Kansas Corporation Commission and I asked for copies of the records, or I looked at copies, make sure all that I can find. And then I went to the Kansas Geological Library, which normally doesn't have plugged records, but sometimes they do in the well files. Excuse me, in their database, and didn't find anything. And then I went online with the Kansas Corporation Commission and did the same thing. And well, you know, I found as many as I could and saw that they were properly plugged, or they were plugged and abandoned. And that was the end of my investigation. And then I found a well that the operator wasn't aware of and made him aware of it. And then later, I went and doing my due diligence and looked at everything again. And then I discovered the well in the southeast was maybe in the wrong spot. And it's actually a plug producer. So that was
Mr. Fisher, pardon my interruption, but you've more than, my question was really, had you prepared a map? Did you prepare your own map? That was my question. That's kind of a yes or no question, actually.
Oh, yeah, yes, I did. It was the plat from the survey. I didn't.
I'm not asking for the source. I'm asking. You've already, I think, indicated the source. I'm really not trying to be rude to you. I'm just trying to.
No, I'm sorry. I'm a geologist, and
it's okay.
I downloaded the map. So does that constitute? And then I went over the data. So,
okay. In your experience, interesting enough, just as an aside, in dealing with maps that use information where the sole data source, say, is the State Geological Survey, do you find that has a high level of accuracy in locating wells?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Really?
No, but, you know, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes they double spot locations. There'll be one description.
Okay.
And then they're trying to correct those.
Okay. You've answered my question. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to focus on one major issue. This is my last question.
Okay.
I think a major issue that is a matter of some contention here. And let me see if I can find the reference back to that now. Has to do with the issue of whether injection into the Mississippi Formation, in this instance, through the number 3 Pfhrem well, whether injection substances will be contained within the Mississippi Formation. Okay, that's a major issue. Are you telling us that based upon all of this data research that you've engaged in, and you've been pretty detailed about what that is, I don't need to have you repeat it again. Are you satisfied that all of the plugged wells that are within the area of review are adequately plugged? Are you concerned that, are you convinced that based upon your research that all the other wells within the area of review are adequately adequately protect and contain the produced fluids within the Mississippi Formation?
The answer is yes, sir. And I've also, to further elaborate, I reviewed the construction diagram. It's very good. It's very modern, very good, and it's limited entry. They're injecting not open hole, but they're injecting through perforations in the Mississippian. So I cannot fathom a way it would escape, travel up the hole, and contaminate surface water and groundwater. I didn't get a chance to testify, but I've had a lot of hydrogeology classes, and because I used to do that for the city of Wichita. I was the first city geologist. But anyways, I'm protective of groundwater. And I would tell the operator if I thought his design was flawed. And of course, it's also being reviewed by the Kansas Corporation Commission by qualified geologists, and they would deny the permit.
Right. Okay. Just one final part of that. When I'm looking at the schematic, which appears on page 2 of the application, the schematic of the well, it shows the well construction, and there's different, there's other information at the top of page 2 that provides some level of detail about the completion, which is somewhat substantiated. Actually, it's parallel to the well sketch itself. But it appears that we have 42 feet of 8 5/8 surface casing that's cemented from the base of the surface casing to surface. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That should protect the groundwater. That's the way it's designed, and that's how the Kansas Corporation Commission permits it. I used to approve those.
I understand that. Going back to the schematic one more time here, it also appears that there's production casing, which appears to be 5.5 casing set at a TD of 2619. And that also appears to be cemented from that base to the surface. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what it shows.
Okay. The combined total of that cementing, does that provide you with any assurances as to the integrity of this well as an injection well?
Well, you have steel casing and cement and limited entry or where you're going to inject it. I'm very confident, sir.
Okay. Is that, I appreciate your answer. I'm trying to kind of move along a little bit, Mr. Fisher, not trying to be rude to you in the slightest.
No, those are good questions, sir.
Is that level of concern reinforced by the fact that there's a cement bond log?
Well, the bond log confirms a good cement job.
I'm not confident, it's not concerned. Okay.
Well, yeah, it evaluates it, and bond log shows competent where it's cemented, and if it's not, the person will have to perforate and squeeze it to bring it up to a protection standard, so it won't migrate where it's not supposed to.
Thank you for your answer. I have no further questions of the witness. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Keen, I have just a couple questions, and they are going to be very summary in nature. Based on my understanding of the protest and Mr. Wilson's questioning of you this morning, I think there are questions raised about the accuracy of some of the records relied on to prepare the application, and whether all of the wells exist where they are indicated on the map, and what type of wells they may be, and whether they are plugged. So I just want to ask you in a very summary fashion some of the questions that you answered in your initial direct testimony. I want to ask it to you again. So first, based on the discussion you had with Mr. Wilson this morning, and based on the discussion of sort of changes in records and your continuing review of those records, do you still believe that injection into the Mississippi Formation in this well will be contained within that formation?
Yes, I do.
And do you still believe, based on all new information you've received throughout this docket and today, do you still believe that the well does not pose a significant risk to fresh and usable groundwater formations in the area?
Yes, I do.
And do you still believe it does not present a material risk of seismicity?
Oh,
Okay, that's actually an excellent question. Where it's my understanding, where there's seismicity from saltwater injection, it is at a total perforated interval in the Arbuckle, especially at the base. And unfortunately, they discovered the bedrock, the igneous and metamorphic rocks have faults, and they're in stasis, they're in equilibrium. But when you forcefully inject salt water at the base of the Arbuckle Formation, it can lubricate the faults. And then you have seismic events, which I don't like at all. And the Kansas Corporation Commission does an excellent job with the Kansas Geological Survey, identifying those areas which are you can attribute to a saltwater disposal well and getting them reduced in volume or plugged out. And this well is separated vertically by a couple 100 feet from the Arbuckle, and it is in sedimentary rocks. It's not in basement rocks. Also, the seismic events are caused where the Arbuckle Formation is perforated from bottom to top in high volumes where they're trying to dewater the Mississippian Formation, and they're injecting several hundred barrels of water per day into the Arbuckle, and that hydrostatic head lubricates those previously unknown faults. This is a new phenomena with oil business, Now, I think back in the 60s, the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, they injected hazardous waste and it caused earthquakes. So I went back to that, and this is what's happening, was happening in Kansas and in Oklahoma. So both corporation commissions are on top of this, I believe, and identifying those certain wells that cause this problem, either getting them plugged or reducing the volume of injection. That was kind of a long answer, but
yeah, I was just referring to your answer on page 8 of your direct testimony and wanted to know if that changed at all based on any information you've received after that that testimony was written. My take on your answer is no.
That's
but
correct.
You wanted to make sure I understood the basis of your answer.
Yes, my testimony has not changed. I still feel that it's not going to be a source of any possible earthquakes by the injection.
Very good.
Again, that was a good question.
All right. I have no additional questions. Let me ask at this time, Mr. Brock, do you have any redirect?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. I think we will conclude Mr. Fisher's testimony at this time then. Mr. Fisher, you may step down virtually.
Excuse me, Chair French. I just have a couple of questions I'd like to direct to Mr. Fisher. Just follow up.
Well,
Very brief.
I will tell you, I'm not terribly inclined to allow recross when there hasn't even been any redirect. But if you can do it in 2 or 3 minutes, and if it's just a couple very pointed questions, we'll allow it.
I promise. Thank you. Mr. Fisher, I thought you testified, in fact, I'm sure you did, that you could not find information on the Pfhrem number 4 well, but yet you've testified here that you're satisfied that containment that the saltwater would be contained into the Mississippi Formation. I think that number 4 well is just a few feet, maybe 100 feet, maybe a little bit more from this proposed Pfhrem number 3A well. How can you be satisfied that the containment will occur when you haven't seen the plugging records? Or am I mistaken?
Do you have the location of the Pfhrem well in front of you?
It's in the west half of the northwest quarter is all I can tell you.
Okay. Well, I went to the survey and I looked at their records, and I went to the Kansas Geological Society, looked at their records, and there is a well to I can't answer that, but I checked all. I can't find my scout ticket if I had one on that well. As far as the way the wells were plugged, I have confidence that the Pfhrem well was plugged. Was it a dry hole or a producer? I'm going to apologize. I misplaced some of my work moving from office to home and then to my daughter's house. So to be able to make a video broadcast. Um,
Well, I think you just answered the question. I mean, you aren't satisfied that you haven't seen evidence that the number 4 well has been plugged. And you can't really state for certain, even reasonable certainty, that the saltwater will be contained within the Mississippi Formation because of at least that well.
Mr. Chairman, I would object. These questions, first, they're misstating the earlier testimony. Mr. Fisher said he didn't have these records in front of him here today, but he's testified that he reviewed all the records in that area. I also think this goes outside the scope of any commissioner questions or redirect. I guess there wasn't any redirect, but goes outside the scope as well.
I'll sustain, not based on the scope issue, but just I believe he has provided an answer, and we will take that under advisement. Mr. Wilson, did you have a separate question, or was that your only question?
Okay, I just don't know how we can ignore that well, but that's okay. I'll move on. Can we get a copy of Mr. Fisher's map? I'm a very visual person, and I really want to understand what's going on out here with these wells. I intend to do further research myself, and I think that the fact that Mr. Fisher didn't review the operator's files, I'm just suspicious that we've done an adequate job of review here. But I would like to get a copy of Mr. Fisher's map if I could. Thank you.
as soon as I find it, I'll be glad to provide it. I think
Would operator be willing to file that into the docket as a late filed exhibit? And is it separate from anything that's been filed? We don't have it attached to anything else, do we?
No, I mean, I don't have a problem filing it. I would just clarify that if he downloaded the Kansas Geological Survey map, that is the plat map that's attached to the application. That's exactly what that is. So I'm more than happy to file it. I guess I'm just putting the commission on notice that I don't think, from my understanding of the testimony, that it's a new or unique document. I think it's what's attached to the application.
Well, I will admit I had some confusion because I thought Mr. Fisher represented that he had prepared a separate map from what was included in the application, but why don't you file whatever he has? If it's the same thing, I understand, but it would clear up the record for us.
Will do, Your Honor.
All right. At this time, we are going to go ahead and move forward. Mr. Brock, no additional redirect.
No.
Okay. With that, then, Mr. Fisher, you may step down.
Thank
And
you,
we
sir.
thank you for your testimony. We will now move to operator's second witness. Mr. Brock, you may call your witness.
We would call Zach Milligan.
Hello.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Milligan. If you
Good
would
morning.
please raise your right hand for me. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Brock, back to you.
Can you please state your name and business address for the record?
Zach Milligan, ZNL Oil LLC, PO Box 318, Longton, Kansas 67352.
And are you employed by ZNL Oil, which is the same ZNL Oil that's the applicant in this docket?
Yes, sir.
And did you cause to be filed pre-filed testimony in this docket on October the 13th, 2023, consisting of 6 pages and no exhibits?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections to that testimony?
No.
If I asked you the same questions today, now that you're under oath, as are contained in that pre-filed testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Is your background in the oil and gas industry, work history, and experience summarized in your pre-filed testimony admitted in filed in this docket?
Yes.
Does the commission require anything further beyond what's in his pre-filed testimony in order to qualify Mr. Milligan as an expert on the basis of his experience in the field of general Eastern Kansas oil operations and well completions?
Absent objection, we would not.
Okay. I would move for the admission of the pre-filed testimony of Zach Milligan filed on October the 13th, 2023, consisting of 6 pages and no exhibits.
Is there any objection to admission of the reference testimony? Hearing none, it will be admitted.
I would tender the witness for cross-examination.
All right, let's see who we have first. I think Mr. Wilson, you have the first opportunity if you have any questions for Mr. Milligan.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Milligan.
Hello.
Did you prepare the application?
Yes. I had help with it. I had somebody help type it out for me.
Did you review it, check it for accuracy, fully completed, etc.?
Yes.
Did you sign it?
Yes.
Would you take a look at the application? I just want to Would you take a look at the application on page 5 and just tell me that's your signature?
I don't have it directly in front of me, that application actually.
Okay, could we pull it up, please?
John Myers here. Would Chair French, would you like me to do that? You're on mute.
Sorry, if you're able.
I am.
Do that. If you can't, I may be able to.
I believe I have it here.
Are you at page 5? Is that? Yeah, we are at page 5. And can you zoom in just a little, John? There you go. And maybe scroll down to the, I think he was asking about the signature.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I authorized Tim Doty to sign that one. Signed a lot of documents here lately. Tim Doty, he was authorized by me to sign that particular document, yes.
Okay, so who's Tim Doty?
He's a guy that works for many of us producers down in Southeast Kansas and helps with certain documents and permits, helps us fill them out. Get them submitted. I'm busy, so I hire some of this stuff out, some of the paperwork that some of the tedious stuff to be done, and then I review them. And if I need to authorize a signature, I authorize it, or I sign it myself, depending on what's going on.
Okay, so he was authorized to fill it out and authorized to sign it then, right? Do you do that authorization in writing?
Over my review, yes.
Is he an oil and gas operator?
I believe so.
Did he have access to your files
Yep.
when he filled this out? Oh, he did. Okay.
Yep.
Did you deliver him to his office, or did he come to your office, or how does that
I believe I
work?
sent him a copy of that one when he asked for the specific piece.
A copy of what?
The log, I think he asked for a copy of the log so he could get perforations and stuff correct in the
Oh, okay. But as
application,
far
just
as
general information.
yeah, as far as the other, I'm not talking about the well itself. I'm just talking about all the wells that were located on the Pfhrem lease.
Yeah, he has access to that. He didn't require much from me.
But he didn't, what do you mean he has access to it? I'm sorry, I just
Well,
want to.
just like all the rest of us, he has access to Canada Geological Survey and doing
Oh, on the
what he needs to
internet?
do. And he's welcome in my office anytime he needs to get something.
Okay, but he didn't actually physically review your files.
What files would you be referring to?
Well, your well files, your land files, your plugging records.
He didn't ask for anything specific more than what we needed. It's a simple permit for an injection well.
What's simple mean? I'm sorry.
It's pretty routine. For the injection wells I've been involved with in the past, it was a fairly routine deal.
Okay, and you testified, you reviewed his application. You reviewed the work that he did and checked it for accuracy, right?
Yeah, and I'm not going to say I'm a crack shot at typos or anything, because that's why I've helped typing stuff out occasionally, because I screw a lot of stuff up. So
Okay, and you weren't concerned with any omissions or anything like that?
no, he's always done excellent work for me in the past, so I have no reason to doubt anything in there. And I looked through it and I missed a few mistakes myself, and we corrected them and resubmitted things actually back into the newspaper for an extra 30 days when we made a few mistakes. So
Did Tim Doty submit the application or did you?
he submitted under my authorization.
Does he still do work for you?
Oh, when I ask him, he just work for any of us local producers that ask him. He usually tries to help us out.
Did you or did you have anyone examine records in the Elk County Courthouse when you were filling out this application?
Yeah, we did all our due diligence on that and asked him. We contacted and did everything we possibly could, to my knowledge. Yes.
You had the courthouse people do it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he called and asked him if there for any royalty owners or landowners adjacent that need to be notified per what the permit is. And as far as I know, we tried to do the best we can.
Okay. Yeah, I've been to a lot of courthouses around the country. I don't think they would answer. They won't do that kind of due diligence work.
I've been in there several times and asked them to look for papers and royalty owners, and I've stood there and they've helped me find it for sure.
Okay. So you think you found all the parties or that were out here within?
We did the best we could with what the information we had.
When did ZNL acquire the Pfhrem lease?
2018, November 1st.
And who did you acquire it from?
At CUIC Oil.
Yeah, I think it was actually Ed AAA was in the name.
CUIC
Right?
Oil, their company.
Did you have an attorney examine title to the Pfhrem lease?
Yep, had to. We did on all the leases we purchased at that time. It was a fair number of them.
Is it accurate that the Pfhrem lease covers the west half of the northwest quarter of section 18?
All I know is we bought the lease, and it is what it is. We bought it and we operate it. We own the well, so we're responsible for them.
Okay, that's not my question. My question is it accurate that the Pfhrem lease, which was taken in 1960 by Mr. Fester, J.L. Fester, does it cover the west half of the northwest quarter containing 80 acres?
I'm not a landman, so I can't exactly answer the question on the geography of what you're asking. All I know is I have to rely on other people smarter than I am to do that. And I hired a lawyer and paid him to take care of that, make sure the leases were correct, and we did.
Well, it's on your application that the Pfhrem lease covers the northwest quarter of section 183110.
Yeah, that's what we probably, because that's what the lease says. That's what we wrote down.
Okay, well, the lease doesn't say that. I've seen it with all due respect.
Okay.
The Pfhrem lease covers the west half of the northwest quarter. The east half of the northwest quarter was owned by Elizabeth Wilson, and there were 4 wells drilled on her, and they're all called the Elizabeth Wilson 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, Rob Wolf owns that land now. Certainly the surface of both the west half and the east half. Did you have a reserve evaluation done of the Pfhrem lease or not?
I believe so. When we did that all those years ago, I believe there was one.
Or a geological evaluation of it?
I have many files on the Pfhrem lease.
What other leases in the Walker Field did you acquire from C&E or Ed AAA in 2018?
Well, I'm not sure how to specify what the Walker Field is. It's a broad area, so.
Okay. Anything else in section 18?
We're just, aren't we trying to discuss a permitting on this 3A well? I'm not sure where we're going with this.
Well, I'm looking at your permit and I'm asking questions with respect to the information that's been filled out on this permit, Mr.
Okay.
Milligan, if you think these questions are unfair, well, let me know, but I think these
No,
are
No,
pretty
go
simple questions.
ahead. Ask away.
Okay. Did you acquire Wilson leases over in the northeast quarter of section 18?
Yes,
And how many leases? One or two?
it's a
Commissioner,
CL Wilson.
Mr. Chairman, I would object on the basis of relevancy and ask that the protester be required to, I mean, I don't know what the relevance that those leases or when Mr. Milligan bought them has to this application.
Yeah, Mr. Wilson, any response?
Well,
what
at
you
the
would
time
feel the
that,
relevance to be?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, if
Yes,
you could just quickly
certainly
tell us what the relevance is.
as the relevancy, they're wanting to open up another injection well here, and Mr. Milligan was transporting salt water unauthorized over onto the Wilson lands. Now, there was a permitted saltwater disposal well over there, but he had no permission from me or anybody else to transport that water over there. And the permit from the Kansas Corporation Commission was for disposal of salt water from the Wilson lease only into that disposal well. So this is highly relevant. I mean, he had from 2018 to 2023, he was doing unauthorized disposal of salt water on, over, and across my land, and putting hundreds of thousands of barrels of salt water on me, and I didn't want it. And pushing oil off into me into. I want to know what's going on out here.
I have to admit, I'm having difficulty connecting the relevance of that to the factors in this application. I think Mr. Milligan has told you the sources of how he obtained the information for the application and the limits of his personal knowledge of what's in the application. And then discussion of another lease that's not part of the application. I'm struggling to see the relevance of that. So I think I'm
Well,
going to
it's
sustain
certainly
you.
with. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. This is my farm. It's within a half a mile. It's in a stone's throw of his operations here. I think it's very relevant. He's proposed, when you calculate this thing out, if he puts 1,000 barrels of salt water a day into that well over a 30-year period, that's millions of barrels of salt water.
Yeah, I get that. And that, if you're discussing the injection of salt water into the proposed injection well, that's relevant. I think where you're going is on a different lease, which would not be relevant to this application. So I am going to sustain the objection.
Mr. Milligan, are you currently producing the frame lease?
Yes,
And how many wells are producing?
2.
And does it currently produce salt water?
Yep.
And what are you currently doing with that salt water?
We're hauling that water.
To a disposal well?
Yes,
How many barrels of salt water does it currently make?
45.
Do you own any producing wells in the southeast quarter of section 12 of 31 South, range 9 East?
I'm not sure where that would be located. I don't have a map in front of me, so.
Okay, well, we pulled up that map earlier. It's the map on page 4. And it shows a producing well in the southeast quarter of section 12.
What well are we referring to? What's the well name?
It was your responsibility to put the names of those wells on there, and they're not there, Mr. Mulligan. And so
Well, you're referring to a specific well. I'm trying to see which one you are specifically talking about.
okay, I'm talking about a well that's just immediately to the north and west of your proposed saltwater.
You're talking about the Walker G1?
I think that might be what it's named, but there is no well there.
Yeah, that well, actually, it's kind of interesting because I got involved with laying that well out and in the plugging operation of that well. It's at probably 4 or 5 miles away from that area. It's just, I'm assuming it's misplaced on the map like Mr. Fisher explained. So I don't do that though, so I don't know for sure.
Well, it would be good information, I would think, certainly for me as a landowner, and I would think for the commission to have an accurate plat map. I mean, the plat map and the instructions on this application say, fill it out, put the correct information on here. I mean, is the correct information not important to you?
I believe we've done the best we can, Frank. Mr. Wilson.
When you sent out these applications, copies of the applications, did you attach copies of the wells, of the well logs and the things you were supposed to, the application references certain things that need to be attached. Did you send those out to the appropriate parties?
We did the best we could on filling that out and sending it out, Frank.
I didn't ask you if you did the best you could. I'm just asking you, did you send out the exhibits and everything, the whole ball of wax?
We sent out everything that was required to my knowledge.
Well, I didn't get copies of the logs and things. And I know other parties didn't either.
I think I personally sent you a couple logs when you requested them from me. Whether you accept them or not, I don't know.
On, I think it's page 3 on the schematic, it requires that you fill in fact, the application itself requires that you fill in every blank. And I noticed there's a number of blanks, and I noticed like one of them was static fluid level.
And I did send that to you as well with the copies of the logs you requested.
Okay, and did you send this out to all the other parties as required in the regulations?
I believe so. You asked for extra because you requested. I obliged and sent them to you. I was trying to be accommodating.
In your pre-filed testimony at page 2, you were asked to describe the project that CNL is conducting on the Pfhrem lease, and you answered basically stating that you wanted to convert the subject well into an enhanced oil recovery well.
Yes.
Did that have anything to do with my discovery that you were disposing of produced salt water from the Pfhrem lease onto my lands into the Wilson number 4A well?
Objection. This goes back to the other leases that we'd objected previously as irrelevant, and the commission sustained that objection. This is the same place Mr. Wilson's trying to go again.
Well, I think it may have limited relevance, but I appreciate that he is trying to tie it back to the reason for this application. So I'm gonna let him answer. The commission will determine what weight we should give the answer, and we probably don't want to labor the testimony on this point, but I'll let Mr. Milligan briefly answer. Mr. Wilson,
you
if
mind
you would
repeat-
please restate that question.
Repeat what you asked me, Mr. Frank, if you would, please.
Is the filing of this application to convert the frame number 3A well into an injection well for enhanced recovery, did that have anything to do with my discovery that you were transporting and disposing of produced salt water from the Pfhrem lease over on and across my lands into the Wilson number 4A well in the southwest quarter of the northeast quarter? Did it have anything to do with that?
We had always planned to convert the 3A well into a disposal ever since I bought this lease from day one. Me and the previous owner he told me that's probably a good thing to do with that well. And then the pandemic hit, things got tight. And then after we started recouping, we converted it to a disposal well or an injection well like we wanted to, or trying to do right now. It's just safer for the lease to whatever produce water to go back in there instead of hauling it down the road and risking people driving water back and forth. Saves money. It's more efficient.
You've asked for authorization to inject as much as 1,000 barrels a day at 700 PSGI.
Yes.
Is that normal?
Oh, we have some other disposals that are pretty close to that. It gives us wiggle room in case we expand on an area or we have to put a little pressure behind it occasionally, get to go with for the water to go down. But my experience with the Mississippi wells is they take pretty much whatever water you put at them, just take it on a vacuum.
If it'll take it on the vacuum, why are you requesting 1,000 barrels authorization?
We don't know. I might expand production in that area. I may drill a few wells. They need more room to put some water in. You don't know what the wells will make when you start to produce them until you produce them.
Are you
We give
satisfied?
ourselves some wiggle room.
Are you satisfied that the 2 wells that remain on the Pfhrem lease are actually producing? I know they're completed in the Mississippi Formation. Are you satisfied there's not casing leaks above where some of that water is coming from?
Both of those wells have liners that have been cemented into them, so I'm very confident that they're only producing out of the Mississippi.
Are you aware of any instances where salt water from the Pfhrem lease has come up old holes and made its way to shallower formations and or onto the surface of lands on the Pfhrem lease or surrounding lands?
No.
And you never discussed it with anybody that they've had that problem out there?
We've never come up. No one's ever said there was. So all I can go off is the years I've been there, and we've never had an issue.
Can you tell me anything about the Pfhrem number 5 well?
Well, I don't know much about it. We plugged it out here a couple weeks ago. Came up, didn't know anything about it. Didn't even know it was there, to be honest with you. And it came up, and I plugged it as I should.
So it was drilled in 1965?
According to the log or the record that was found. That's my understanding, yes.
Was it completed as what was the current status with the Corporation Commission?
I couldn't answer that. I don't know. All I know is we had to get our permit. We needed to plug it out to be safe. So we went in there and drilled down, cleared the bottom and plugged it out as per state regulation.
Well, state regulations also provided that you have it, you have it in your records. It's either temporary.
It is in a record. We filed all appropriate paperwork. It's all in there. It's submitted. They accepted it.
When you purchased it from Ed AAA, did you change operatorship of that well with the Corporation Commission? Was it on the list of wells?
Nobody knew it was there until recently, Frank. And as soon as we realized it was there, I took ownership of that well and I plugged it. I did immediately, actually, within a few days. I can't do something, I can't accept something I don't know about. When we did, we took care of it.
What about the number 4 frame well?
As far as I know, it's plugged. I've had several people look the area over, including the KCC geologist, and as far as I know, it's plugged from all the research that's been done.
Is that wishful thinking, or, I mean, do you have some evidence that it's been plugged?
Well, there's a plugging record, I would assume, or they wouldn't have said it was okay.
Okay, I thought I understood Mr. Fisher to say he couldn't find any records on it, but could I get a copy of the plugging record on that number 4 well?
Guess we can, Frank, if that's what you need. I don't know.
Well, I'm concerned about it, quite frankly.
We've had several experts look at the surrounding area and everybody's satisfied that this well is okay to go as far as disposal well. So,
well, I don't think
I'm gonna follow suit and agree. People who are much more experienced than I am, and from what little experience I have in the oil field, granted I'm much younger than some of these guys.
Are they here? Are these
very
people
comfortable?
Are these people you're talking about here? Are these experts? Are they here to testify today?
Yep, Brian Fisher, and then I believe Mr. Cox from the KCC is here as well.
Okay, but Mr. Fisher, he testified that he had no records of the number 4 well.
He had no record on hand, is what he said, I believe.
Well, could you send me a copy of the plug-in report then, or some information on it?
Yeah.
All right, if the parties will agree to get together on that, I think we can move to the next line of questioning.
Chair French, I believe I have no further questions.
All right, very good. Mr. Brock, I see you went off mute. Did you have something?
In terms of Mr. Wilson asking for well records, I just want to make sure so this number 4 well, as my understanding is, it's been reviewed by Mr. Fisher and the KCC, but I don't want to be obligated to provide some kind of record that doesn't exist, nor do I want it to be held out there. There were some wells that weren't visible at the surface that were found later, and I just want to be careful that I know there was an exchange between the witness and Mr. Wilson, but I don't know if these copies exist or not, and I don't want to obligate us to provide that if they don't. If they exist, I have no problem, but
the only order I have is, to the extent there are records either in the possession of the KCC or ZNL, if you could provide those to Mr. Wilson informally, that would be helpful.
We will do that. Thank you.
With that, Mr. Marsh, do you have any cross for Mr. Milligan?
I do not have any cross for Mr. Milligan.
All right. We will turn to commissioner questions. It looks like we may have lost Commissioner Keither. John, have you heard anything from Commissioner Keither?
No, I was just noticing that myself. She did drop and come back earlier.
Okay, so she may be having a technology issue.
Yes.
Why don't we go to Commissioner Keene at this point? Do you have any questions for Mr. Milligan?
Just one. I think all the rest have been more than answered. Good morning, Zach.
Morning, how are you?
Good, thanks. Mr. Milligan, I'm going to kind of rely upon the fact that you've been qualified here for the purposes of this hearing as an expert. You certainly have a dearth of field experience, to be sure. One kind of follow-on question with your field experience: do you now plug wells?
Do I?
Yeah, does your company plug wells?
We don't have a plugging permit. We do a lot of the prep work for the pluggers to come in and plug.
I see. Okay. Well, my question to you, I had a question about how did you choose the injection rate and the volume, but you've more than answered that several times over. And my only other question is, I sense that you're really pretty familiar with this area, especially you've owned, I think your well count was like 92. Does that date back to 2018, thereabouts?
No, we've acquired many leases since then, and we actually acquired another lease here as of January 1st. So we've got many more than 90, probably 120 to 130 wells now, probably.
Are they all in somewhat in proximity to each other within Elk County?
Oh yeah, most of them are in Elk County, and I got a few in Chautauqua, just south of the Chautauqua line.
Okay, so my question is simply this: we're talking about an application here where you want to flood the Mississippi. Your proposal is to use this as an enhanced recovery well for the Mississippi. I think it's a pretty easy question, but I just want to rely upon your experience here. How amenable is the Mississippi to being flooded into secondary recovery in this particular area?
Oh, we got several leases that are doing that, and it does help. It'll help stimulate the production in that zone. I've seen it personally happen. Sometimes it's immediately, sometimes it takes years to come around.
So if I'm understanding the location, then one last question here, the location of where the proposed injection well is, that you have the leases that are pretty much contiguous to that within the area of review. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your indulgence in my questions, Mr. Milligan. I have no further questions of this witness.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Keen. I do have a message here that says Commissioner Keither says we can continue, and we are recording this so she can review. I do not have any questions of you, Mr. Milligan. Let me ask whether your counsel has any redirect for you based on any of the cross-examination or commissioner questions.
I just would like to clarify one thing that I think would make I feel like there was a line of questions asked that maybe the record wasn't completely clear on. On this well plat map on page 5 of the application, there was some questions about that well was misplaced. And can you just tell me the source of that map? Where does it come from, and where do you physically place the wells on there? Who places them on there? Just give me a background of what that is.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I don't believe the well on that map, no, that I know of. On the plat map on this?
Yeah, I'll just ask it more simply. Is that a screenshot of the map provided by the Kansas Geological Survey?
Yes, that's all we used, was just a map from the KGS is what it was. I'm sorry,
okay.
That was misunderstanding.
Yeah, I was just wanting to, before when you were talking about a well being misplaced, I was just trying to clarify that you weren't placing these wells on this map. This was a map taken from Kansas Geological Survey records.
No.
Is that correct?
Was on there. We've seen that well on there, and I've just assumed we've seen it other places on my other leases where wells have been there and weren't there.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. At this time, I think we will conclude the testimony of Mr. Milligan. Thank you for your testimony. You may step down virtually. Let's see where we are. I believe we are ready for Mr. Wilson's testimony, but we've been going for 2 hours now. And I want to move through the next couple witnesses as quick as we can, but I also know that everybody probably needs a break at this time of the morning. Go refill your coffee cup, take a restroom break. Let's take a 10-minute break and reconvene at 11:10. So we are now in recess and off the record, reconvening in 10 minutes at 11:10. right, I've got 11:10. Let me just check and see if we've got everybody back. If those of you that are back can come on camera. We got John, got Mr. Brock, Mr. Wilson, Commissioner Keen. I don't see Commissioner Keither yet. Let's give, oh, there she is. All right, I think we've got everybody, and I see Mr. Marsh. I think we've got everybody we need to proceed at this time. So we are now back on the record in this hearing. We are ready for the examination of Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson, you're representing yourself, so I'm going to call you to the stand. If you would take yourself off mute and raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm the testimony you are to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. I believe you have filed 4 sets of testimony. I have in front of me pre-filed testimony, 3 sets of pre-filed testimony on November 17th. You've got a direct testimony and 2 sets of rebuttal testimony on that day. And then I have a set of rebuttal testimony filed December 28th. Do I have correct? Are those, did you file 4 sets of testimony? Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
All right. Is all of that testimony still true and accurate to the best of your belief?
Yes, I believe so.
All right. With that, are there any objections to admission of Mr. Wilson's pre-filed testimony as I just described?
No.
If there is no objection, the reference testimonies will be admitted into the record. With that, we are ready for cross-examination, and Mr. Wilson, I will turn you to Mr. Brock. Do you have any cross-examination?
I do not.
And Mr. Marsh?
I have no cross-examination either.
All right, that makes it simple. Commissioner questions. Commissioner Keither, any questions for Mr. Wilson?
No, thank you.
All right, and Commissioner Keen?
Thank you, Chair French. I have read a couple of them more than once, all of the pre-filed testimony that Mr. Wilson has filed with us, and I think I understand pretty clearly where he's coming from. I just don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I am in the same boat with Commissioner Keen. Based on the pre-filed testimony and based on your examination of the witnesses earlier this morning, I think I understand the position as well. So I don't believe I need any clarification of questions. So at this time, we've run through all the questioners. I don't think there is anybody else to ask questions, so we will have you virtually step down, Mr. Wilson. Thank you for taking the stand and for filing your testimony with us. We will now move to, I think we are ready for staff. Mr. Marsh, you may call your witness.
Thank you, Chair French. Commission staff calls Ryan Cox to the stand.
Good morning, Mr. Cox.
Good morning, Chair French.
If you would please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you. Mr. Marsh?
Thank you, Chair French. Can you please state your full name for the record?
Ryan William Cox.
And Mr. Cox, by whom and in what capacity are you employed?
I am employed by the Conservation Division, the Underground Injection Control, as a professional geologist of the Kansas Corporation Commission.
And what is your work address?
It is 266 North Main Street, Suite 200, Wichita, Kansas, 67202.
Are you the same Ryan Cox who caused to be filed in this docket testimony consisting of 12 pages on December 6th, 2023?
I am.
Was this testimony created by you or at your direction?
It was.
Now that you're under oath, do you have any corrections to make to your testimony?
I have a few corrections to make that came about after the Pfrem 5 entered into the AOR.
What are those corrections?
The first one is on page 7, line 14. Should read
Could we
3.
pause? Sorry, just a second. I'm trying to get your testimony in front of me. My apologies for not being ready.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead. What page?
Page 7, line 14. Should read 3 plugged wells instead of 2. Further on page 7, line 18, should read 11 plugged and 2 producing. And finally, on page 8, lines 7 and 8, I can't locate the records for 2 wells, and I misprinted the wells, I believe. I have the Adeline Wilson number 2, API 15049-20176, and the Elizabeth Wilson number 3, API 15049-71106. And that concludes my corrections.
So I'm a little unclear on that last correction. Can you just restate what is being changed in that sentence?
The name of the wells that are involved, I believe I put in the Elizabeth Wilson 1, which I had mistakenly swapped in. That is the one previously in my testimony that has the problems at 600 feet.
Okay. Okay, and now that's the Adeline Wilson number 2. Is that correct?
That would have been, let me see my testimony real quick.
Sorry, I was just having a hard time figuring out which ones I need to swap out for which ones.
Okay, page 8. Yes, the Elizabeth Wilson, the Wilson Elizabeth 1 is the one that will be swapped out for the Adeline Wilson number 2.
Okay. And the E Wilson number 3 is still correct?
No, correct. I don't have any records of that one.
Okay,
That
gotcha.
it's plugged anyway.
Gotcha. Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to make sure the record was clear there.
No
Go ahead,
worries.
Mr. Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Branch. So, Mr. Cox, does that conclude your corrections?
It does.
Okay. If I asked you the same questions contained in your testimony today, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Do you swear the answers contained in your pre-filed testimony were and are true to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Is it still your recommendation that the application submitted by ZNL Oil be approved?
Yes.
At this time, staff moves for Mr. Ryan Cox's December 6, 2023 pre-filed testimony to be admitted into the formal record.
Is there any objection?
No objection.
Hearing none.
I object. I've read the testimony. I've looked at the plats and I've heard all these switches and stuff, and quite frankly, I can't keep up with it all now. It's just absolutely too confusing. And I'll go back to my opening statement this morning. I'm not going to repeat it, but I'll incorporate by reference, if you will. We've got to get to the truth of this matter, and we've got to get accuracy and stuff. And I've heard testimony this morning about is this a snapshot of the KCC maps and plats or whatever it was and stuff like that. And the application calls for what it calls for. It's pretty clear, and I don't want to be
I think I understand your objection. I'm going to overrule it because I don't see anything that wouldn't allow the admission of this testimony, or a lack of foundation for it. What I would say is, you say you want to get to the root of which records we're looking at. I think you've got the right witness on the stand to ask him what he reviewed and what the records are. So I would just encourage you to ask those questions on your cross-examination, if that's acceptable. But I am going to overrule the objection, and Mr. Cox's reference testimony will be admitted into the record.
Thank you, Chair French. At this time, commission staff tenders the witness for cross-examination.
All right. Let's see on my list. First, I've got operator. Do you have any cross for Mr. Cox?
Just two. Mr. Cox, when you were forming your recommendation in this docket, did you review all information that you deemed pertinent, both which was contained in the application and from outside sources, in order to reach your opinion?
I did.
Okay. And just to clarify, you answered earlier, but is it still your opinion that the application should be granted?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Mr. Wilson, do you have questions for Mr. Cox?
Yes, I do, please. Mr. Cox, when you first reviewed the application, well, first of all, were you the first person with the Kansas Corporation Commission to review the application, or was there somebody before you?
That would have been me.
You the first person, okay. Were there others in your group or your supervisors that also reviewed the application?
Generally, no, unless there's an uncommon factor, and then I get other people involved.
Okay. And
that's not quite accurate. I'm sorry. The legal staff also helps on several portions of it, including helping me out with notice and other things of that nature.
So when you first reviewed it, did you find everything in order?
For the most part, yes.
Well, oh, okay. And what part not?
There are some deficiencies that you refer to that are deficient in the matter. But in general, when I'm running a review of all this, I have a review sheet that pulls all my pertinence together. And in that, if I can draw a complete picture of what's going on with the well and what's going on, where it's at, how it's behaving, where it's going into, if there's anybody producing in that area, I make a determination if a good enough picture was determined or not. And if there are major deficiencies that don't allow me to see the entire picture, I absolutely request further information from operators.
And you found some serious deficiencies in, is that correct? That you had to look on?
In my opinion, there are no deficiencies that would warrant the dismissal outright of the application.
Did you contact Zach Milligan and express any concerns to him, or ask for additional information or anything?
Not in this case. This was a pretty well put together application, minus the deficiencies that I feel were minor. And I do believe that I contacted field staff about some of the further outside of the normal AOR we do to determine if there were any issues there.
Yes, and I believe that outside the quarter mile, you did find some deficiencies.
Correct.
Okay, well, why don't we start with the Pfhrem lease, the west half, the northwest quarter of section 18, and just walk me through the wells just briefly. I don't need a huge history, but I want to understand a real brief history, and I mean brief.
Okay, as near as I can tell, I have 4 wells with records that I know for a fact were drilled. Those would be the Pfhrem one, which has been testified as to being a cable tool drilled. And that is, I believe, in the northwest quarter, which would correlate to the Pfrem 1 currently in production by Mr. Milligan. The Pfrem 2, which is the...
Man, I don't want to, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the Pfrem 1, was that the well that was drilled in 1937
Yes,
by IMO?
I believe so.
Okay, did you find a plug-in report for that well?
No, as I just said, that I believe that to be the well in production by Mr. Milligan.
And why do you believe that?
Because the quarter calls match up, the names match up, everything goes. I have a electronic log from 1961 on the Pfrem 1, which could have easily been run 24 years after it was originally drilled to enter into to determine if there was actually any potential in there.
Were you aware that the Pfrem number 1, the IMO Pfrem number 1, which was drilled in 1937, was completed as a dry hole?
A dry hole completion does not stop a future operator from entering back into that well.
I understand. But you're satisfied that well is currently producing?
Based on the data that I have received and that I have looked over, yes, I believe they are the same well.
Did you, and you've looked at the files with the Geological Survey and the Log Bureau and whatever?
Intensely.
Did you also look at the records of the operator?
I did not.
Okay, continue.
The records of the operator are the records we have at the commission.
The records of the operator are the records you have at the commission. How do you know that?
In general, it's what we are required to collect when we get the completions and other things of that nature.
Well, modern day records, I would agree with you, but the old records, I'm not sure I would think that would be accurate.
We have resources here as well that aren't necessarily available to the public at this time, but we're working on it, and I draw inferences off of those.
Okay, continue.
So the Pfrem 2 is the next well that I'm sure of. This one was the SWD in your testimony with the suspected mechanical issues that has been plugged since 2010. We have plugging records. It's an adequate plug. And we have the Pfrem 3 that was claimed to have been an injection well that with potential mechanical issues, which is also plugged in 2010 and was never an injection well. And then we have the Pfrem 5, which came up into our system on October 19th of 2023. And that one was plugged by Mr. Milligan very recently.
How recently?
I don't know the exact date, but it was within the last month, I believe.
Yeah. What do you mean it came up in your system? I mean, it's the number 5.
We never had a record for it at all. And then at some point it was submitted and sitting on a desk and was entered into the system once we found out about it.
Now, I've got copies of stuff from the Corporation Commission from well over a year ago that well was in your system. With all due respect, Mr. Cox.
I disagree.
Do you know who put it in your system? Is there a record of how it got in there?
There's no record, but no.
It just kind of mysteriously appeared.
Correct.
I find that hard to believe, but I guess the Lord works in mysterious ways, perhaps. How about the number 4 well?
Sure, he does. I have no record that well was ever drilled.
You have no record that it was drilled. Well, Mr. Fisher testified earlier, he'd reviewed some information on that well.
I'm not sure. I believe he might have been mistaken. I can't speak towards Mr. Milligan himself, but what I know is that I have no record of the Pfrem 4 ever being drilled.
Would it seem a little unusual to jump from number 3 to number 5 without a well being drilled back then?
I can't speak to that. I see operators all the time that have odd numberings that don't necessarily make sense to me.
Okay, continue. Thank you.
That was all I had on the Pfrem lease.
Okay. What about the immediately to the east of the Pfrem wells? I know that the plat shows it to be the Pfrem lease, but it's not. It's the east half of the northwest quarter of section 18, and there's the Elizabeth Wilson wells drilled on there. What can you, did you find records of them and how they've been plugged and abandoned and whatever?
As I testified, I found 11 of them with plugging records and 2 that I have no records of.
11 wells on the Elizabeth Wilson. Okay, could you tell me?
Not necessarily the Elizabeth Wilson. This is a quarter-mile to the half-mile area of review, which also pulls in some Adeline Wilsons and some Moline Wilsons. It's not simply the Elizabeth Wilson lease.
Yeah, I'm familiar with those leases and the wells. But I'm curious what you found, because you've indicated you found some problems, and quite frankly, I'm very concerned about the application, the disposal well covering the Wilson number 4A well. And when the application to convert it to a saltwater disposal well was done in 2018, I'm concerned that the review of that was short-circuited, that there was basically no review done. And I'm curious to hear about these wells that have problems.
I have the luxury of all these systems being searchable, whereas these used to be, even back in 2018, would have been a lot of searching through physical files to find what's actually there. I have the benefit of technology to be able to collate all these and get them to me in a much nicer, more complete fashion.
Well, would it, okay, tell me, I mean, what did you find on the Elizabeth Wilson wells in the east half of the northwest quarter of said section 18?
I'm going to need more specifics because, as I've testified, 11 of those are adequately plugged, and I have testified to having 2 that have an issue.
There's 4 wells, Mr. Cox, in the east half of the northwest quarter. It's not rocket science. What can you tell me about the Elizabeth Wilson wells?
I can tell you that 2 have been lost wells and the rest are plugged adequately that we have found records for.
Which 2 are lost?
I will need to refer to my testimony as those have been written into the record. 1 second here. That would be on pages 7, lines 21, where we have the Elizabeth Wilson 1 with the API of 15049902233. That one was the lost hole that I believe, and they could not get past the 600 feet, but there's a cement plug from 600 feet to the surface. And then the second would be the L Wilson number 2, API 150492017. And that one also appeared to be a lost hole, but much deeper stratigraphically, and allowed most of the plugs, the full plugging that we generally require, to be on there.
Where was the number 1 well, the E. Wilson number 1 well located?
Without consulting a map specifically, I believe that E. Wilson 1 was in the southeast of the northwest quarter.
And the L. Wilson 2? on the Elizabeth Wilson lease?
Offhand, I'm not entirely sure without consulting my current map.
Can you consult the plat that's attached on page 4 of the application?
I cannot, because at this time, after that new record was entered in, there's been some movement of some wells to bring them a little bit closer and correct where they are based on the records we have found and what we know. So that plat map has in fact changed since October.
Can I get a copy of that plat map?
I'm sure we could arrange for that.
Moving over to the northeast quarter of section 18, can you tell me the wells you looked at over there?
Without having my list in front of me and without a specific well, I'm not entirely sure. Unless one of those 2 wells that I testified had the problems in their construction after the fact, it was plugged adequately, or is one that I need to send commission or our districts to find at some point soon.
You did 2 area reviews out here, and you're not being very forthcoming with what you found. Is there a reason?
I did 3 area reviews and I've given all the pertinent information. If you want specifics, I'm sure we can get you those specific plugging records. But as I've testified, I have found 11 plugging records from the Wilson, Pfrem, Walker type area, as well as the 2 bad plugs.
Well, yes, you offered. I'll take those specifics. I need them. You know, I think that some operators, you kind of want to just leave everything out and leave it to guess and say that, well, we don't know, or we can't find it, or we've done our best. And I don't think this stuff should be rocket science. I mean, we're talking about millions, potentially millions of barrels of salt water being injected under pretty high pressure. And I think we need details here. I mean, I think
Mr. Wilson, what's your question for Mr. Cox?
Excuse me?
If you could phrase it as a question, that would be helpful.
Mr. Cox, you've reviewed the application. Is it adequate in your mind, in your opinion?
In my opinion, and the opinion of legal staff, which helps me to determine some factors of it, yes.
You mean legal staff looked at this plat that says that you should put the well names, lease boundaries, unleased mineral rights owners, well numbers, producing wells, formation tops. Your legal department said that's okay?
I can't speak towards what legal reviewed at the time.
You just said they did. You worked with them.
As near as I can tell, I don't know the specifics to what they review. I leave that. I'm by no means a lawyer or a real estate lawyer specifically. There's things that are beyond my expertise that I rely on other staff.
Are they going to be called as witnesses today? I'm trying to find out about these wells that you said you did an area review on. And I don't think it's too much to ask, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Wilson, I think he's given his answer. Let's move to your next question.
Mr. Cox, how long have you been a geologist?
13 years.
And you've been a geologist for 13 years. So you've been a geologist since you graduated from college then?
I consider the work on my master's thesis to be part of as a geologist, yes. So as soon as I got my bachelor's degree, that's when I start the clock on being a geologist.
Were you employed as a certified home inspector from May 2020 to January 2022?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Well, he did testify he's been a geologist all that time, working as a geologist, did he?
I don't think being a home inspector is related to the field of geology.
Well, I agree with that.
It's sustained, so let's move on.
Okay, thank you. You found earlier on, Mr. Cox, that you were going to recommend approval of this application. Have you seen anything in my protest or in my pre-filed rebuttal testimony or testimony or my request for hearing protest that makes you think that I haven't been truthful or that I have misrepresented anything?
I have seen nothing of substance.
I'm sorry. You've seen nothing of substance that I wrote, or you've seen nothing of substance that is in error or incorrect?
I've seen nothing that would help me make a determination one way or another. In my estimation, it's a lot of hearsay, but I also am not a lawyer or an attorney at all, but there is nothing technical, which is my portion of the review, that would make me change my opinion.
Did you hear any of the attorneys make any objection on the basis of hearsay of anything I've testified to?
Objection upon, I don't see how this is relevant, or this line of questioning is relevant, and it seems kind of outside the scope of Mr. Cox's testimony.
Yeah, I'll sustain it. I'm not sure the utility of asking Mr. Cox to add weight to your for or against your testimony, so I think we'll move on.
When you conducted the area of review, when did you actually go out on the premises?
That's beyond my purview. I do the area of review based on records that we have, which is a long-standing principle of how to do the phase 1 type area of review that we conduct in this office.
So you didn't go to the premises to conduct your environmental review?
Correct. That would fall under the purview of field staff, which get contacted when I do find problems in the records.
You made reference to the DJK Ranch number 18-2 well. That appears to confirm depths on the Pfhrem wells. What are you getting at there?
Well, I was just mentioning that stratigraphically, everything they're saying is area wide.
Well, you didn't say stratigraphically. Did you mean to say stratigraphically in your testimony?
I would need to refer to the exact line to find out exactly the words and what context you're referring to this in.
Page 7, line 4.
That I didn't use the word stratigraphically does not change the context of any of that at all. We're talking about depths and we're talking about stratigraphic depths. The fact that the fact that the word stratigraphic is not there doesn't in any way change that.
Okay, then what do you mean by that then?
It means that the depths they're looking to inject into are confirmed to be the Mississippian age strata.
Well, I don't understand that, but you on page 7, you've estimated the oil water contact point. In the frame number 3A well, what and you've estimated it to be near the bottommost perforations at 2287 feet. How do you come up with that?
I do stratigraphic correlations based on the data presented to me in those logs, be it if usually I believe the CND had different porosities, which allowed me to match up gamma to the local logs and confirm that the formations were the same.
Okay, so there's 33 feet of wellbore that's perforated for injection of salt water. The oil water contact point would be what, 90% of the way down of that 33-foot column? Is that accurate?
As I testified, it would be near the base of those perfs.
I'm sorry?
It's in my testimony that it would be near the base of those perfs based on the offset logs. Hence the word estimated.
Okay, so most of that wellbore there is oil saturated and above the oil water contact point. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, you're going to have to repeat that.
If your oil water contact point is near the bottom of that zone, then there is a huge column of oil riding on top of the water. Is that correct?
Probably not currently. With past efforts, I can't speak to what's in there, but that seems fair.
What's the difference between an injection well and a saltwater disposal well in the Mississippi? I know the Wilson 4A well that the Pfhrem water was going into was a disposal well into the Mississippian formation, but this is proposed to be permitted as a Mississippian injection well for enhanced recovery into the Mississippi. Well, what's the difference?
Well, in this case, it's a repressuring well, which in that means there has to be production in the area that would be reducing the pressure and the oil in that area, and the enhanced recovery portion repressurizes that area that has been produced.
But isn't any salt water injected into the Mississippian formation going to have a pressure effect?
It all depends on the hydraulic conductivity and everything to how far that pressure front will actually reach. But no, it's localized regionally localized.
Not sure what that means, but can you explain that a little bit?
It means that the exact same way that the EPA has dilution is the solution to pollution, eventually you reach an area where there's no longer an influence. And we treat that as being a quarter mile here in Kansas.
You found some problems with the wells in the half-mile area of review. And again, you didn't go out on the premises to conduct that environmental and whatever it is, review, the area review. You did that from the office, right?
As I said before, yes.
Huh. Cool. I wanted to ask you about your comments on unleased mineral interest owners. And you state here, Mr. Wilson in his testimony claims that the notice was not provided to all unleased mineral interest owners. And I'll stand by that. And you state here, however, I can only rely on the information provided by operator in its application, which indicates that notice was properly provided. Do you stand by that?
As I understand it, I do, but again, as a clarification, this is largely something that legal staff handles.
And did your legal staff tell you that it was okay?
Yes, based on the timeline we have created.
If I had evidence that someone else owned minerals in this area, would you want to know?
Absolutely. We would love any information we can get.
Really? Would it matter?
It might matter. It might have to, in this case, if there were people that weren't noticed, I'm sure we would have to renotice them.
Thank you. I appreciate your comment. You're sure that you'd have to renotice. And I wasn't going to bring this up, but you mentioned it. We had earlier on, we were talking about the problem, well, a couple things about the Chautauqua County reference on the notification. And I certainly opposed it, and the commission ruled on it that notification was correct. But you brought it up here, so I'm going to question you on it. And I hope nobody has any objection to that, because I certainly respectfully disagree with the commission on that. I don't understand how you could take a 3-letter word like elk and make a typographical error and end up with a 10-letter word like Chautauqua.
Mr. Chairman, I do have an objection on that. We'd filed a prior motion. It was fully briefed by both sides and the commission ruled on it.
Yeah, I'm going to sustain the objection. I don't think Mr. Cox brought it up, Mr. Wilson. I think that was your questioning that brought it up. So we have already ruled on notice. So let's move to the next line of questioning.
Okay, but I just do want to clarify. I don't think I brought it up. It's on Mr. Cox's testimony at page 9, around 6 through 10. Lines 6 through 10. But anyway, okay, we'll move on. You've indicated that the application will not violate any correlative rights. How did you go about determining that?
Well, I believe that's in my testimony as well. That would be, I determine if there are any producing wells in that area of review, who they belong to, where they're injecting into, and everything. And at that time, I determined that there were no one besides ZNL operating producing wells in that area.
And you figured that out real quick, that well to the north and west of the proposed well that's shown on the map, on ZNL's map, that it indeed was not even a well.
Did I? I believe I found a plugging record for that well.
Well, I mean, it's shown as a producing well on the map. We talked about that. I guess I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. We will now turn to commission questions for Mr. Cox. I will begin with Commissioner Keither. Do you have any questions?
Not at this time, thank you.
And Commissioner Keen?
Just a few, Chair Friend, just a few. Good morning, Ron.
Morning, Commissioner Keen.
So I just want to have you embellish one aspect of what's in play here for us and for the record. I believe you've indicated that in effect, your internal review is not confined or limited by information provided by the operator. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
In fact, I'm going to surmise, isn't it correct that you cast a much wider net, do you not? I think you alluded earlier to using both public and non-public sources. Did I hear that correctly?
That is correct.
Is a part of that non-public source RBDMS?
It is.
And what is that in essence?
That is our risk-based data management system in which we put all the well information we ever collect and we know about for sure into there. That includes scan documents, GPS well locations, well names, the histories of the wells, the transfers, and so on and so forth.
It's really a significant resource, is it not?
Very much. Some of my queries take a while.
Kind of consequential. It's kind of been put together by like Topsy, I think, in a sense, from all the different sources of information that go in there. But I think for those of you who become adept, which I suspect you are indeed, at working with the system is quite helpful, quite beneficial.
Very much.
And especially in the area, pardon me, I interrupted you, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, between RBDMS and the KGS's well logs and the Walter Digital Library, I have a wealth of information at my fingertips.
So basically, all of this, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but doesn't all of this together play into the thoroughness of the review process that is a lead up to the decision about whether or not to grant the application?
Yes, it is.
This came up. I'm almost finished with my line of questioning. This came up before. I can't remember now. It's been a long morning. How the questioning came up. I think it may have been through Mr. Fisher's testimony, but I'm just curious with all these resources you've used, and you indicated just in the last batch there that you use these KGS resources, and list those for me again. Which were those resources you indicated from the survey?
In general, I use the KGS Interactive Well Mapper, which is the same thing we've been discussing this whole time about creating the plat map. And I also use the Walters Digital Library, which is an extension of the Kansas Geological Society. I think they run that, and they coalesce and bring together every single record that has ever been produced that is linked to an API, and some that even aren't.
Absolutely. So basically, you have kind of an amalgam of both not only the surveying information, but the society's information as well. Isn't that correct?
Correct. Well, the society gets all their information from everybody else. I don't think they produce anything.
Yeah.
So I think it's just from the KGS, and then I think it's specifically from the KGS.
Okay. The point of curiosity here, my last question in this hearing, then I have one more question. What have you found to be, I mean, as a general rule, what level of accuracy would you ascribe to the KGS well location maps?
I generally always take it with a grain of salt, because as we've seen, things can be plotted in the wrong area in case like somebody that was scanning something in saw that it was in, say, section 13, but it was really in 18. So I sometimes have to cast my net out further into things that would appear to be the same. So the accuracy, we're kind of hamstrung by with what we have on record. for the accuracies. So in general, they're pretty good, but there are some discrepancies.
I think that's a fabulous answer because I think it's accurate. I've had concerns about the accuracy about that. I've seen that anomaly, really anomalous, just nonsensical things in the past. Nobody cares about that. Let me go on to my last question here. I believe the last set of rebuttal testimony responses were provided by Mr. Wilson on December 28th, 2023. Have you read through these?
I have. I actually have them right here. We're talking just to clarify, you did say the rebuttal of my testimony by Mr. Wilson, correct?
I didn't say that, but that's what I meant. Thank you for that. You bootstrapped my question a little bit. Thank you. That's correct. So taking a look at that then, upon reflection, does it reveal or cause any new concerns for you beyond the database and information base you use to recommend approval of this application?
None at all. Everything he brought up that are within my realm of the review, I had already clarified and cleared up, and they were of no concern to me, as I felt like I had adequately identified each well that was in the area of review.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cox, I very much appreciate your indulgence of my questions. I have no further questions of this witness.
Thank you, Commissioner Keen. I think you've clarified every question I would have had. Maybe just to further explore, the one issue of that. So I think your testimony was that of these various well record databases, you think the information is generally pretty good, but sometimes things pop up that are wrong, or staff knows are wrong. And I think maybe it was Commissioner Keen that said it. Sometimes you see something that's just nonsensical. In this case, I mean, there was some discussion of that some records got updated in the course of your investigation. And I mean, I think you said you don't know exactly how that happened, but is it, would it be reasonable to assume that maybe in the course of looking at this, there were multiple staff members looking at it, and maybe they did find something that didn't make any sense, and somebody helped to update the records, whether it was KCC staff or talking to the Geologic Survey? I mean, is that possible, how that would get updated?
In general, yeah.
Sorry.
I'm not entirely versed on how it all goes about, as that's separate staff from myself, but I would generally notify them if I find a problem, and then they help to update the records.
So it doesn't necessarily indicate anything nefarious at play. If staff's in the middle of an investigation and they see that records look inaccurate and they want to update databases, that can sometimes just happen in the ordinary course. That's kind of what you're telling me?
I would estimate it happens daily.
Okay. That I think was what I wanted to clear up for myself, of sort of how this happens. So I don't believe I have anything else for you. Mr. Marsh, do you have any redirect that you need to pursue with Mr. Cox?
I don't believe so, Chair French.
Okay, very good. Well, I think we have come to the conclusion of Mr. Cox's testimony. Mr. Cox, we thank you for your testimony, and you may step down at this time.
Thank you.
All right, we will now move to closing statements. We are going to begin with Mr. Marsh, then we will move to Mr. Wilson, and then we will move to Mr. Brock. So we will begin with Mr. Marsh. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair French. Well, just to be short and sweet, I mean, staff's recommendation is that the application be approved. I believe that operator's application meets the permitting factors applicable to permitting an application. And I think staff's done its best to try to address the concerns presented by Mr. Wilson, and even to some extent went above and beyond normal procedure as far as expanding the area of review out to a half mile as opposed to just doing the standard quarter mile area of review. But hopefully we've addressed as many concerns as we can. I don't think that staff has any issues with the permitting of the application, and like I said before, would recommend approval. Thank you.
Mr. Wilson, would you like to make a closing statement? You're on mute currently.
Thank you, Chair French. I'll go back to my opening statement, and I want to reiterate that. I won't read it over. I certainly do not recommend approval of this application. I'm just surprised that you guys have all sorts of accolades for your Ryan Cox testimony here, and I certainly don't share those accolades. If all that information is out there and stuff, I don't understand why it can't make it into that application. And I'm outraged that that application reads as it does. The instructions on that application are clear. And anybody in the oil business needs to learn how to follow those instructions. We're talking about the freshwater resources of the state of Kansas. We're talking about my land out here. And to have an application be filed with the KCC like this one has, and nobody seems to care about the accuracy of it and just say, oh, we've got these wonderful electronic records. Well, why does those records need to make it into the application? It has to get there. It has to matter. Due process requires that. I'll be truthful. I sincerely am outraged at this whole process. I would love to have the commission come down to the farm. I really would. I think that sitting behind these computers, when we're talking about environmental issues and things like that, it just doesn't work. I could show you things out on the farm that your computers aren't going to tell you, and what's happened out there and where these wells are and stuff like that. I'm outraged. I was afraid of this, and I think you guys need to. I don't think you're doing the state of Kansas a good service. You're here to protect the environment and things, and I'm outraged. I have nothing further.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Brock.
Just a very short one. I would just summarize the evidence that's been introduced in this docket. We've had 3 parties testify as recognized expert witnesses, all 3 of whom have conducted extensive reviews. We've had 3 separate area of reviews done by the KCC's geologist, a separate area of review done by independent geologist Brian Fisher. All 3 of these experts have reached the same opinion that this application meets all KCC requirements and should be granted. And then we have the testimony from the protester consisting of 1 lay witness who doesn't agree with the expert witnesses. There are allegations about certain things in his testimony, unleased mineral interest owners, various wells, but there's no specifics of any of that. No identification of any of these problems, who they are, what wells we're talking about, how they may pose a risk, just general allegations. And I think based on the evidence before the commission, the decision should be clear and consistent with what the 3 experts have recommended in this docket.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brock. We have concluded closing statements. Before we conclude and close the record, are there any post-hearing issues the parties wish to address or that commissioners wish to address? Hearing none.
There's some deliverables that parties agreed to, the plat map and a few things. I jotted them down here. I assume those will be forthcoming. I do want to respectfully disagree with Mr. Brock. If he said there's no basis or no evidence on those wells, boy, I talked very specific wells up there in the west half of the northwest quarter of said section 18. He needs to read my testimonies.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
That's
We all
nonsense.
have your testimony and we have your statement today. And we can review the record. As far as deliverables, I think there was some informal agreement among the parties to exchange information. If you all could do that over phone and email, we'd appreciate it. Not necessarily anything where you're going to get an official commission order on discovery, but we appreciate the parties' willingness to exchange that information back and forth. So with that, we are going to close the hearing in the docket. The record is closed and we are adjourned. Thank you all for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.